Most people living in a modern society are affected by craniofacial dystrophy, and as a consequence they are downswung, reducing their cross-sectional area with a significantly reduced tongue space. To open their airways and breathe comfortably, they make two classic compensations. First, they move their head forwards to open the airway, creating a forward head posture. The second, by raising some of the bulk of their tongue up out the airway into their mouth. Interestingly, there are only a few positions in the mouth where the tongue can rest and function comfortably. And these determine the type of malocclusion, tooth crookedness, that they get. Ideally, the tongue should rest and function on the roof of the mouth, the palate, with no activity in the facial muscles when swallowing. However, if part of the tongue is unable to fit on the roof of the mouth and rests between the teeth, which is common for most of the compensatory positions, then the facial muscles will be recruited to reciprocate, that's provide a balancing force to oppose or balance the tongue. Because of craniofacial dystrophy, the tongue space is not only reduced, but is also set back and down closer to the airway, and the palate is small, which makes fitting the tongue there hard and an ideal swallow all the more difficult. In addition to this, most people, probably around 85%, never fully switch from an infantile suckle to an adult swallow. Babies suckle with their tongues spread wide, working against their cheek muscles to breastfeed. Remember, they don't have teeth. Adults should swallow with the tongue working against the palate, the roof of the mouth, not between the teeth, which should be together, with the cheeks and the rest of the facial muscles doing nothing. However, too frequently, this transition does not occur or only occurs partly. This is possibly due to the fact that we're giving babies food which is too soft, so they don't have to make this transition, and too early, so that they're not ready to do so. The facial muscles are the muscles of facial expression, innervated by the seventh cranial nerve. Ideally, the tongue should be exclusively on the roof of the mouth, and the force of the tongue should push up, forwards and outwards each time you swallow, raising the cheekbones, developing the midface and the jaws. The problem with a sucking swallowing pattern is that each time you swallow, you are sucking in on your teeth, pulling them inwards and backwards, ultimately pulling the whole face backwards. The most common bad swallowing pattern is known as the reverse swallow. This is where the tongue rests between the teeth, moving forwards during a swallow, with the lower lip contracting to reciprocate the force of the tongue, and the upper lip not being involved. The sides of the tongue may or may not also come between the teeth, with the cheeks reciprocating as well. Muscles which are used more become larger. Babies and cherubs have large cheeks. Adults should have hollow cheeks. In time, enlarged cheeks become jowls as you lose muscle tone when you age. Interestingly, some people bite on the section of tongue which is in between their teeth, as they swallow, tongue splinting. So that although their tongue is slightly between their teeth, they do not need to recruit their cheek muscles and frequently still have hollow cheeks, although they will usually have noticeable scalloping on the sides of their tongue. In an ideal swallow, there is no outward sign of any activity. The muscles of facial expression, the facial muscles, do nothing. Busy on the inside, calm on the outside. The Mu-Push swallow. I suggest you watch this at least once. It is the what and why explanation, if you need it, for the Mu-Push swallow. The practical exercises follow, and you will need to watch these several times. Swallowing is one of the few functions we do which starts as a conscious event and moves to a subconscious. I have a great control over the front 2/3 of my tongue. I know how to start a swallow. I do this hundreds of times each day. However, I have little control over what occurs next, the movement of my throat, or the wave of peristalsis which carries the food down to my stomach. This part of the swallow is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. In the same way that I'm not actively involved in regulating my kidneys or liver function. When we are trying to understand how things work in the body, it is often useful to look back at our embryology, our very early development from a single cell to the complex multicellular organism that we are now. At one point, very early in our development, we comprise of only 3 types of cell. At this point, a human fetus looks a little like a tube, which is thought to represent an early earthworm in our evolution. The first tissue on the outside is the ectodermal tissue, which goes on to create all the structures on the outside. The things that we see as ourselves and are in active control of. Then we have the endodermal tissue on the inside, which goes on to create all the internal structures like the kidneys, the liver, and the tissues which seem to work all by themselves without us worrying too much. Then there's the neural crest cells, which go on to create the brain and nerves, which we're going to ignore. The anterior or front 2/3 of the tongue originate from the ectodermal tissue, the same as your skin, muscles, and everything that you are consciously aware of and consciously control. The posterior or back third originates from the endodermal tissue, the parts of you which run automatically without you needing to think. As such, the nerves controlling these tissues come from the conscious and the subconscious systems respectively. Most people have, at some point in their lives, had difficulty initiating a swallow. When you're swallowing a pill or if you have a dry mouth, for instance. These moments can make you reflect that this is a function which requires some form of conscious initiation to trigger it, which then proceeds automatically. There are a number of ways to trigger a swallow, and within the mouth there are 2 distinct patterns of activity which do this. One for a suckle with the tongue pushing on the cheeks and the lower lip, and one for an adult swallow with the tongue pushing on the palate. Unless you have to do something, you may well not do it. And most people, something said in the region of 85%, never fully switch from a suckle to a swallow. They continue in part to use an infantile swallowing pattern or action to trigger a swallow all their lives. In our soft modern world, it is possible to be lazy. Once, to prove a point, I suckled a Big Mac. It was not a pretty sight, but I managed it. There is no way that a hunter-gatherer could have eaten their food like this. They really had to chew. Knowing and understanding the trigger points is vital. Repetition of the correct swallow will, over time, build a stronger neural pathways and imprint the correct trigger mechanism. Never using the old pattern will lead it to atrophy, waste away. In this section, I will describe a series of exercises which, step by step, will help you to achieve the mu push swallow, where your tongue is pushing up and forwards every time you swallow, and your facial muscles, the muscles of facial expression, are completely inactive, passive, not doing anything. And then to achieve a suction hold where you maintain this position during the day as your postural position. Use the tongue exercises in this app to prepare yourself or to improve your ability to do this.